welcome to Epic Bedtime Stories with Jess. Oh my goodness, I am going to have to break this into parts because I'm going to read a little more from The Hobbit. And this precedes the story of Bilbo in the tunnel before the dragon. But I love this because it is such a great contrast with Bilbo's later character arc of being brave, of stepping out, going toe-to-toe with the dragon. Starting with the very beginning of The Hobbit, which is describing where the Hobbit lives. And it's one of the most famous quotes from literature because it's introducing a character that no one has ever met before Tolkien. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. From the very beginning, Tolkien establishes that the hobbits are creatures who inhabit the world by creating spaces around themselves that feel homey, that feel warm and inviting. And when you read the description of Bilbo's home, you just want to be there. The story would be boring if all we talked about was Hobbit life, because Hobbit life isn't particularly exciting. Bilbo's going to have visitors. The visitors end up being the dwarves. Tolkien describes the dwarves, and they're so fun. They have the hoods and the cloaks and the beards. But Tolkien really does a good job of sharing his idea of who the dwarves really are. They prefer the dark. They make beautiful things, and they like to own beautiful things. They're not particularly brave or courageous themselves. They know the value of money. They know how to make things happen. And they're looking to hire Bilbo to do a job for them that they don't want to do themselves. When Bilbo is being described, he has ancestors that are typical hobbits and ones that are a little less typical, which are the Tooks. And the Tooks, that is the part of Bilbo that actually might like adventure. The Tookish part is buried underneath. And yet, the Tookish part is the part that rises up to the occasion of this particular adventure. We see it first when the dwarves, they're getting ready to sing their song. Now, they've all arrived at different times, and Bilbo is completely disoriented by their arrival. He doesn't know how many are coming. They're coming one or two at a time, and he is like, what is happening? For someone who likes to be prepared, for someone who likes things to happen a certain way, this is already throwing him completely off. So we start this reading after the dwarves have invaded Bilbo's home. They've upended everything. They're messy. They're demanding. Bilbo actually says, "Confustigate and be bother these dwarves," he said aloud. "Why don't they come and lend a hand?" Lo and behold, there stood Balin and Dwalin at the door of the kitchen, Philly and Killy behind them, and before he could say knife, they had whisked the trays and a couple of small tables into the parlor and set out everything afresh. "Now for some music," said Thorin. "Bring out the instruments." Killy and Philly rushed for their bags and brought back little fiddles. Dori, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. Bomba produced a drum from the hall. Bifur and Bofur went out too, and came back with clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Dwalin and Balin said, "Excuse me, I left mine in the porch." "Just bring mine in with you," said Thorin. They came back with vials as big as themselves, and with Thorin's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a beautiful golden harp. When Thorin struck it, the music began all at once, so sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else and was swept into dark lands under strange moons, far over the water, and very far from his hobbit hole under the hill. The dark came into the room from the little window that opened in the side of the hill. A firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on, while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on, and suddenly, first one and then another began to sing as they played. Deep-throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes, and this is like a fragment of their song, if it can be like their song without their music. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. For ancient king and elvish lord, their many a gleaming golden hoard they shaped and wrought, and light they caught to hide in gems on hilt of sword. On silver necklaces they strung the flowering stars, on crowns they hung the dragon of fire and twisted wire. They meshed the light of moon and sun. Far over the misty mountains cold to dungeons deep and caverns old we must away ere break of day to claim our long forgotten gold. The mountains smoked beneath the moon, the dwarves they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their hall to dying fall beneath his feet, beneath the moon. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man delves. There lay they long, and many a song was sung unheard by men or elves. The pines were roaring on the height, the winds were moaning in the night, the fire was red, it flaming spread, the trees like torches blazed with light. The bells were ringing in the dale, and men looked up with faces pale. Then dragons' ire more fierce than fire laid low their towers and houses frail. The mountains smoked beneath the moon, the dwarves they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their hall to dying fall beneath his feet, beneath the moon. Far over the misty mountains grim, to dungeons deep and caverns dim, we must away ere break of day to win our harps and gold from him. They sang, the Hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and a jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something Tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in a dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels, of the dwarves shining in dark caverns. Suddenly, in the wood, beyond the water, a flame leapt up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was playing Mr. Baggins of Bag End, under hill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to, and go and hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until all the dwarfs had gone away. Suddenly he found that the music and the singing had stopped, and they were all looking at him with eyes shining in the dark. I love that the dwarves, even though they're difficult characters, are so ready to sing and play instruments. The song itself is telling a story. Like most folk songs, it's how we pass along our stories, how we used to do that before we had all these other ways of telling stories. It's talking about what the dwarves created and then what took it away. They're telling the story of Smaug, destroying things and stealing from them. And as they sing, Bilbo feels their love of beautiful things. He feels it as if it is his own. It's a fierce and a jealous love. And something Tookish wakes up inside of him. And he wants to see the things that they're talking about that he has never experienced himself. He wants to wear a sword instead of a walking stick. Then he looks out the window and he sees a little snap of fire. And he's immediately brought back to the other part of himself that is much less adventurous, the part that is fearful, the part that realizes that adventure comes with danger. Bilbo doesn't even know exactly at this point what his adventure is going to be. He does know that the Tookish part of him has been awakened by this song, by the idea of all of this that he has not seen and experienced. And I wonder if we all have that Tookish part of us, that part of us that's maybe buried a little deeper, especially as adults. Like kids are more adventurous usually, but as adults, we've stopped being as adventurous because we're afraid. We like our little hobbit homes. We like dependability and routine and structure, and nothing's wrong with those things. Sometimes something awakens the Tookish part of us. Maybe a song, music, art, someone, a person, They might awaken the Tookish part of you, make you want to do something more adventurous. Whatever awakens the Tookish part of you, sometimes it's good to listen to that part. It requires more bravery. It is inherently more risky. But it might just be worth it.